We took over in the 70s. Yeah, we took over in 1974. In 75, we built the freestall barn. When I took over, I was going to show my dad how farming was done on a big scale. And the first year we wound up dragging out 15 dead cows. And through it I met a vet friend of mine from Missouri, Dr. John Whitaker, who went to work and came out to our farm one day and basically showed me what I was doing wrong in terms of my soil, in terms of the feeding program. Left me with a book called Soil, Grass and Cancer that I wound up reading. Once I got done reading the book, he basically said to me, what you need to do is go to work and start making premixes that actually reflect what's going on out there in the real world, and start feeding a little different and educating farmers on how to do things differently. Well, and ultimately, not only does poison get into the cows, but into the plants, then the animals, and then ultimately us as human beings. And when you have a situation like we have in Ontario, where 50 cents out of every tax dollar goes to the sickness care business, you have to really begin to wonder. The other day I got a letter from our dear Premier, Mr. McGinty, congratulating me on turning 65. Went on to detail that we are among the most privileged people in North America with the wonderful drug plan that the Ontario government has available, and that there are 3,300 kinds of drugs that they actually pay for. And I'm thinking, with 50 cents out of every tax dollar, this is not sustainable. And they have nothing in their repertoire about dealing with vitamins or minerals for people. It's all strictly drugs. And you really have to wonder where we're headed with this whole thing. It is rather difficult to stay organic because we now live in a polluted society in very many aspects, and one of those aspects is the rain that falls is oftentimes laden with chemicals that have been dispersed. It's not only that, it's also the genetically modified crops that we're putting up with, the contamination from those crops with pollen and drift makes it very difficult. And even if farmers are buying feed, they're oftentimes buying genetically modified, low percentages. Our wonderful federal government now is trying to push for a 1% tolerance level of contaminated GMOs in regular identity preserved and organic feeds. So one really has to wonder whose side they're really on.
I think it's probably the best place to raise your kids. Of course, we didn't raise them anywhere else other than on the farm, but they've learned good work ethics because they get involved in your day-to-day operations. Mm-hmm. It also taught them some good business because they had to go out and market their garlic and find the markets for it, hire people to help them do the work. The new office went up in '94, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, up until 90 or 91, all we used was the buildings that we had sitting here. 1998, we built the mixing plant.
And then the dryer plant after that.
The lab and the dryer was back in 2000, then we did that in the year 2000. What I've strove for, what we've worked hard for all these years, is to try to teach people that there are options out there, that we don't just have to jump on the chemical bandwagon and run with the rest of the herd. There is room there for you to think independently and pick and choose the methodology and the way you want to get there. I think that over the years we've tried to teach farmers that there's more to it than just getting something going out the end of your laneway. It's building quality into what it is that you're doing, and not just worrying so much about quantity, but that quality is also part of the equation. Go ahead.
Well, I know we get calls in the office of people that are looking for more local. They want to know where their food is growing and how it's growing, and I think we're seeing more of that all the time.
I think it's an uphill battle, but there definitely are more people that are interested in doing something about it. And depending on the kind of income that these people have, or reprioritizing how they dispense or disperse their income, the consumer is starting to vote with their dollars. Yeah, if anybody going into farming, it's
especially the younger generation.
It's a real challenge because of the unprecedented, insane land prices that people are willing to pay right now. Lots of young people would probably do well to just rent land for the time being until they get their feet under them a little bit. Find retiring farmers or older people that are willing to maybe share crop with them. Anything along this line would probably make good economic sense. The sad part is, in our society, we measure people by their material accumulation. And I think that our parameters of measurement are somewhat skewed. I mean, we really need to re-examine them and look at what people are doing in terms of handing off clean land to the next generation and unpolluted soil and this kind of thing, and good quality food, which is more important than trying to impress everybody that watches what we're doing.
I think we need to look at probably sources of good, clean, healthy food to raise their families.
And also, I think with the higher price of fuel and transportation and input costs, that locally grown food is going to probably become much more important, because people can't continue to spend extravagantly on food that they have no idea how it was grown or how it was raised or what kind of chemicals were dumped on it. I think this is definitely something that they need to examine a little bit differently than what they have been in the past. All these chemicals that we've used over the years are starting to show up in our water supply. And definitely there's a connection between the problems we're seeing in our society with our kids, especially ADD and ADHD, along with immunocompromised systems that a lot of these young people have. And I think a lot of that goes back to the food and also to the water. I mean, that's one thing that they can never do in terms of cleaning up water the way we do it right now, to put water into cities, and that's to take those chemicals out of that water. It's impossible to do the way they're doing it. Most people, by the time they're our age, are on a high blood pressure medication or diabetes medication or something along that line. Says volumes for where we're headed, because a lot of our ancestors didn't die from heart attacks and they didn't die from diabetes. We're seeing a lot more young people today with diseases like cancer, and I mean, these hospitals are expanding for cardiac surgeries and organ transplants and this kind of thing. We've been on this quest to find a cure for cancer since forever, and it just seems to be getting worse, not better.
Encourage people to start growing their own food. They can do that in very small areas or pots or whatever. You can grow some food.
Yeah, I think that that's very highly important, that people learn how to grow and process their own food again.
Preserve it.
And also form alliances with farm families that they can work with, that they can trust. I think that's also very critical, that people form these alliances and learn to establish trust and rapport, and even if need be to help some of those farm families to harvest and process part of the food that they're ultimately going to consume in return for the labor they provide.
And there is some of that going on with community shared agriculture.
Well, the idea of a collective is great, provided everyone is willing to put in their fair share of the work. I think that's probably going to be the way of the future. They have farms where they have 7 or 8 families per farm. They have, instead of cows, they have goats that they can hand milk. These families are poor and destitute, and they're somehow managing to get these projects off the ground. And these people are starting to actually make this thing work, and as it begins to work, they'll buy more farms and put more people on these collective operations. And I think that's another thing that we really need to look at very closely in the future if land prices continue to escalate like they do. The other thing would be to put some of these farms into land trusts that they can't be taken and subdivided or commercialized to the point where you build houses or businesses on this land, where this land would continue to be used as a way to produce food for people down the road.
Over the years, BioAg has really worked hard to bring you the most current speakers on the most controversial issues.
And as a consequence of that specialization, standardization, consolidation, we saw every larger farms with fewer and fewer farmers that were left. It's prominent in livestock and poultry in the U.S. It's coming in dairy, and with genetic modification it will be there in crops. We basically turn farmers into nothing more than corporate hard hands on their own land.
Father Richard Wilhelm, who told me about it and said that what it could possibly do for you. I was a victim of arthritis. I had it in my right elbow, my knees, and in my ankles.
Energy type of medicine. We're dealing with something called a vital force, which is something that we can't see or we can't feel or we can't smell, but it's there and we've all got one. It's like I guess it's like a halo all around our body.
So I want to suggest that we have, I would say, a very arrogant culture. We think that we have all the answers.
How's your electric meters to read faster? Well, your electric utility really isn't going to go out there and say, hey, we want to fix this problem, because they're getting money for something they didn't have to produce.
To be partly deaf is an advantage sometimes in public life, especially when they're saying bad things about you.
I'm trained as a scientist and specifically as a medical anthropologist. In other words, how diseases evolve, how they change, how they come about, how new diseases are created through circumstances that have changed.
But what the overall effect of it is, it's impossible to say. It is a time bomb. It's ticking away. We are going to make our children and grandchildren to inherit all this mess.
Chicken is a junk food. And unfortunately it's true even for organic chicken to some extent, because they use the same breeds.
30 years ago we started using glyphosate, and it essentially became a one-chemical agriculture. So that we increased virulence of the pathogens. What we've done is we've just hammered certain groups of organisms so that they no longer exist in the soil.
Very serious tipping point that if we don't change something, humanity is going to suffer severe consequences.
The final solution for this has to be with the people themselves. It won't be the farmers. There are two things that people can do. One is that they have to now say, enough is enough. This is our right. It is not the governments or the companies to tell them what they should eat. It's not the Monsantos of this world who think they're going to feed the hungry world. It is people themselves, the people of Canada, the most precious country on earth. It is for the people to now demand of their politicians and governments that it is their divine right, it is their constitutional right under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, to feed and eat what nature makes, to feed their families. Therefore, they are the ones who are going to say, we do not want these 5 materials in our food supply: hormones, antibiotics, slaughterhouse waste, genetically modified organisms, and pesticides. Remove them, ban them. Because if you don't, we have the right to sue government. We have the right to sue parliament. We have the right to stop the whole business in our country. Because after all, the country belongs to us, the people of this country. It is not the government. It is not the corporations. Time has changed.
There's more and more people selling raw milk, and are they going to allow it to happen with a certain level of control, or are they going to just allow it to continue to go underground and try and prosecute people willy-nilly and pick on somebody like Michael? As I had told my dad when I went back to school, just go sell the farm, I don't want any part of it, I'm going to do other things with my life. And all of a sudden one day I had a change of heart and came walking back and said, anytime you're ready to retire, I'm ready to take it over. But as this movement, organic movement or ecological movement grows, people will get more choice. And I think you're going to see that some of the large commercialization is going to have to change, because the consumer is going to ask for and demand, and ultimately the consumer is the one that votes with their dollars. So encouragement I would have for organic and ecological type farmers is just hang in there and do a good job as best you know how, and work toward that end goal, because sooner or later it will be recognized by a big part of society. Once the health of people deteriorates to a point where they have to do something, they will start to maybe sit up and take notice.
On behalf of BioAg, our staff, our dealers, and our distributors, I want to thank each and every one of you, our loyal customers, for your support and patronage over these 30 years. It has been quite a journey. More than ever, I'm so appreciative of the fact that you have helped us to produce clean feed and clean food for our children and for the population at large. Never before in history have we been so challenged with herbicides, chemicals, and pesticides in our land and in our water, nor have we ever been so challenged with GMOs in our food. From the bottom of my heart, I wish to thank each and every one of you for the support and help that you have given us. In fact, our children's future depends very much on what we say and what we do. So from the bottom of my heart, I wish to thank each and every one of you for your support over these last 30 years. Okay.